Sarah, did you read your end user licensing agreement for the Switch 2, or did you just click agree
No, I literally
and throw caution to the wind?
No, what I did was I kept trying to poke the button that like I thought it was a checkmark button. Yeah. But I get this happens to me every time. It's not a checkmark button. It's a scroll to the bottom of the EULA, and then it'll make. And I felt like an idiot because I could not. It took me way too long. I was like, how do I read it.
That's becoming much more common as they force you to scroll to the bottom so you have less of an argument to say you didn't read it, because they are quite literally like, read this, and everyone's like, no.
And then they make it prohibitively long and full of jargon where nobody wants to read it.
Interesting. Jeff,
yeah, how is that just not the legal argument, Haley? What? That like, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what the this says.
Yeah.
Well, people who aren't lawyers enter agreements all the time, Jeffem, and they read those. How come you couldn't take a few minutes to read this one and understand it fully?
Because I don't have a lawyer to read it for me.
Yeah.
Do I have to call you every time I'm going to play a game and read it to you?
Haley, can I play this?
Well, you guys get embargo agreements. Do you read your embargo agreements when you get them?
Of course
I'm pretty sure it just says if you post anything where you're legally allowed to bust into your house and murder you.
Yeah,
that's what they all say.
It might say that.
With those, at least they tell you like, hey, here's the date, dummy.
Yeah,
it's in red and it's bolded.
Red. Yeah, they highlight it and they're like,
don't post anything before this.
Well, that's why these have the most important bits in all caps. Don't you guys stop and go, whoa, they're screaming this at me. I should probably take a little second and read this.
Because I want to play Mario Kart.
Because you want to play Mario Kart. Honestly, valid critiques. These are some of the most non-legalese things you could ever read, though, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but it's... So here, let me share my screen. Context, I'm a video game lawyer. Anything here is not legal advice. I'm talking about this for fun. It's informational purposes only. Don't come at me. Leave me alone.
Good job.
Thank you. So I thought it'd be fun, and I did read. This is the Wii one. I don't know why I have it up. I was just curious. This is the most. Actually, they have the DS one on here. DSi is the oldest one they have readable on their website for their end user licensing agreement. And I was trying to find the N64 one, but I couldn't really find a good template I knew was real, so I decided not to do it. But
Did they have one for N64?
Of course.
Yeah, when did they decide? It's so weird to me that like,
of course they did.
It's even needed, but
it's the
I guess
law.
I understand.
You guys. They have to.
But like when you turned on your Nintendo 64 when I was 10 years old or whatever, they weren't like, here, read this and click that you agree to it.
To sign it.
No, because so the law has gotten better with like, so what you're thinking about is acceptance. So you could say, I didn't accept this agreement, therefore I'm not subject to the terms. So that's why now these days there's so many like, check the box. And yeah, so back in the day, nobody be suing anybody for games because nobody even knew what a game was. So that's why everyone was like, yippee, an N64, and no one really talked about it. But nowadays, where everybody's suing everybody up the wazoo, they're like, okay, well, now you got to go to arbitration if you want to sue us, and they make you subject to all these things to try to filter out the
Do you have to agree to that?
issues.
Like in the EULA, like you agree that if you took them to court, you'd have to go to
What do you mean, do you, Sarah? You agreed to it. You agreed to it right here in these terms, Sarah. You're going to arbitration if you ever have a problem with Nintendo. Is this the Switch 2? I did notice, so I have the Switch...
That's crazy that they make you agree to what kind of legal battle you are allowed to have based on this terms of service.
Yep, see, so here's the disclaimer, everything in caps. Please read this section carefully, Sarah, because it requires the Nintendo to arbitrate certain disputes and claims and limits the manner in which Nintendo can seek relief. So there's some jurisdictions in the world where these actually aren't effective. So there's
does that hold up? I feel like that's just
the
like
jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They'll even sometimes call it out. Like I know Quebec in particular is very strict about like these things cannot be imposed in these types of formats. Like somebody has to have like active acceptance and then it could count. And they'll say, except for certain jurisdictions like Quebec and blah, 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 like these terms are all enforced against you. But what they're trying to do is essentially prevent future class actions in particular. Mm-hmm. They're very worried about class action. So they have the class action waiver in here, you know, you and a bunch of other people can't all come together and sue Nintendo for the same issue.
Which I don't think should hold up in court when I just want to play Mario Kart. And maybe I want to get involved in a class action lawsuit
Maybe
later.
on a Thursday, a little bored.
I don't think me playing Mario Kart should make it so I can't be in a class action lawsuit against Nintendo. But they put it in here mostly to scare you off of doing it, not for not trying.
It's just to prevent more lawsuits, yeah. When you're dealing with a corporation so humongously huge as Nintendo, it's just this would probably take away 95% of the potential issues they could be dealing with in the future, because nobody's going to choose to go to arbitration against Nintendo and spend the money on that. Like, if I look at their terms, they probably say like expedited arbitration, which costs even more money. You know, they might say that you have to pay for it. Let me find that. Claims subject to binding arbitration, binding individual arbitration, subject to the terms of blah, blah, blee, blee, blee. May only be settled by binding individual arbitration conducted by American Arbitration Association, the AAA. So those are expensive, tens of thousands of dollars to do an arbitration through AAA. You are a consumer, meaning that you only use the console and or the software for personal, family, or household purposes. Consumer arbitration rules, blah, blah, blah. So let me see here.
And this is the easiest one to read, Sarah. So,
and Sarah, this is easy as pie. Listen to how easy this is to read. To the fullest extent allowed by applicable law, the arbitrator may only award legal or equitable remedies that are individual to your Nintendo to satisfy one or individual claims that the arbitrator determines are supported by credible, relevant evidence. They will be binding on the parties may enter into judgment, blah, blah, blah. All that is to say is that you couldn't just, if you were to trying to sue them over something to do with your Switch 2 or the software they're in, you would have to, if you wanted to sue them, do arbitration first. And if you think that arbitration shouldn't count, you'd have to first go and try to go to court and argue that arbitration shouldn't count, which is a bunch of money first, and then move on to the actual thing you want to sue them over. And even then, you wouldn't be able to do a class action, which is much more cost benefit to like multiple parties where can split the cost or something, right? Like, remember the lawsuit with the N64 Palm thing? And they're like, oh, we'll just send out a glove to everybody affected, and there was a huge class action against them kind of thing. They're trying to avoid that ever happening again, so that's why all this is in here.
Man. Yeah. So, like, if there was Joy-Con drift, they wouldn't want people entering a class action lawsuit.
Exactly.
Because their Joy-Cons are all broken,
exactly.
Basically.
And then the other, so that kind of stuck out as compared to their previous terms of service, there was a lot more arbitration language. I don't think there's more things happening. Like, it's not like suddenly there was an arbitration and now there is. It's just that I think they're adding more detail so that it's like super explicit how the procedure goes. So if something were to be arbitrated.
And I think they're just like throwing as much in there as possible so they have as much to use if people do try to come for them in any legal way possible.
They've probably arbitrated.
Like what Disney did with like the Disney Plus where that person got injured on a Disney ride and they were like, but you agreed on your Disney Plus subscription.
That's insane.
Like, it's all garbage.
That's insane. That was like, that was crazy. That's like, so I will say, I wrote literally one of these for a video game last week. Most of this is so insanely standard. It's crazy. Not that that excuses it, but just that literally every company does this. And it's like, this might seem crazy when you look at it like, oh my God, they're trying to screw us. It's like, every company's done this since the beginning of companies and the internet.
It's like, actually, every company's been screwing you.
Yeah.
And eventually, maybe, if we ever get into a better place politically, we could take this to the Supreme Court and probably get arbitration thrown out, like you must arbitrate or whatever, but it's not, now's not the time.
That's why there's been laws about how you have to make it insanely clear that you're, like, there's been case law that, oh, I didn't read this because I didn't realize I was waiving such important rights, right? Like maybe I would have read it if I knew something crazy. So that's why a lot of them now,
there in all caps
at the very start. Note, this agreement contains they're screaming at you, a binding arbitration provision and class action waiver, full extent permitted by law, blah, blah, blah. Like, so they're trying to say you can't even argue that you didn't know it was that serious and that something that crazy was there because you don't have to scroll down to know that this is in here kind of thing. But they also made you scroll through the whole thing before you accepted, so they could also say, well, on you, babe, you should have read it because you scrolled all the way to the bottom, you know.
It seemed like there was less of it on. I feel like I scrolled through it really fast on the Switch. Like, it doesn't feel like it was as long as this.
Are you just really excited to play your new game?
To be honest, yeah. I was not paying attention whatsoever.
And I don't expect anyone to read these. I just read these because I write them, so it's nice to like know what the big boys are doing to see how they write things. And I read this language every day, so it's like, it's low-key kind of fun, which I realize is a absolutely disgusting take, and I'm weird for that. But like you were pointing out, Sarah, before we started, Take-Two Interactive had some drama this past week, just during Summer Games Fest, right? Where people were they were review bombing them because they said their terms of service are really aggressive now and doing all these awful things, blah, blah, blah. I think they added this mandatory, again, here's the mandatory arbitration. This agreement contains mandatory arbitration clause, waiver clause. It's almost the exact same language that Nintendo uses. And it says here, all users residing in the United States and any other territory other than, so here are the jurisdictions that it's less strong for you to do that: Australia, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, or the territories of the European Economic Area. So those countries have stricter laws against
those places that have better laws
to
protect their citizens from
arbitration.
Strongholding. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So US, Canada, all those other places, it's like freebie. Just get them to decide everything. But I think they were talking about how they added some modding language. And I think the only language they added was just that you're not allowed to use mods that could affect gameplay for other parties or like go against the terms of service. So if you were to make a multiplayer mod that like makes it so other people's game shuts down or something, or whatever. And I think they were adding in language to clarify that. And somebody online read it as you're not allowed to make mods anymore, maybe, or something more generic. And because they had this response that came out and they were essentially like, oh my God, chill. Like, it's literally nothing crazy is in our terms. Please calm down. Take-Two does not use spyware. I guess maybe people misread their privacy policy and thought that it said, like, we're allowed to look in your house and look through your computer and stare at you, which it absolutely did not say that. And then the other thing they said is Take-Two does not permit abuse of mods. So I'm sure they just put it in there, like, your mods must comply with the terms and not affect other people's gameplay or something like that. And someone read it as no mods allowed now or something, which, to be fair, they have the complete right to say no mods allowed if they want. That's also a thing they could do. But I think they're pretty open to mods at Take-Two, my understanding. So they've been chill about it in the past, kind of thing. But the other thing that I think I could mention before we finish that I think is important about EULAs is people get confused about whether you own a game or not. And that's like a super loaded question. Maybe I'll ask you guys, do you think you own your video games?
Of course not, Haley.
Wait, if I wasn't asking you under this context, would you maybe think you do?
I feel like I used to think that I owned my video games, but yeah, now that I own them all digitally, I feel like I don't actually own them.
So yeah, I think the misunderstanding, it comes from the fact that you've always since the beginning of time had a license to your games. That's never changed since games have existed. So when I purchase a game, I'm purchasing the right to play it via this thing I'm getting. That's always been the case. When I buy Spyro, I don't own the Spyro IP now. That's crazy, right? Like, no one would assume that. So that's the first thought you could think of. But I think what's changed so much from day one versus day now is these things called technological protection measures, which essentially allows them to F with your licenses after you've gotten them and like change things with your licenses after you got them. So like I can take an N64 game and put it in my N64 and it's going to work until the apocalypse, right? Like nothing is about that's going to change because there's nothing in the N64 as a technological protection measure that could prevent it from them from turning it off from headquarters, right? They can't go into my N64 and turn it off. But now, since with like cloud servers and like all that kind of stuff and everything being online on the internet, they can still control your stuff you buy from home base. So now they have all these additional rules around like you still are getting a license, but it's easier for them to revoke it, I guess is the main difference. And I think that's why people get confused. Like, I used to own my games. Like, well, no, you never did, but they just couldn't. It was like impossible for them to claw it back, I guess.
Easier for them to take it away from you.
Yes.
Than in the past.
Than in the past.
We are worse off
in that way.
But that's, yeah.
Yeah. It's way easier for them. They even say in here, like, you acknowledge that if you fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, Nintendo may render the console and or the software permanently unusable in whole or in part. So they're saying we're allowed to brick your Switch too, whenever we want.
I've seen a lot of jokes about that online, especially on TikTok, of like people doing things with their Nintendo Switches, right? Like they've been like running tests on them and stuff, and they're like, how... And then people are like, Nintendo's going to brick your Switch when they see you doing that. Yeah. And I think from a PR perspective, I feel like with Nintendo's the only one people are like leery of because they are in the news so often doing ridiculous legal things to people. So it's like the trust between consumer and Nintendo, I feel like, is not as strong as it used to be. Like, I feel like the trust between consumer and producer like Nintendo, it's like it's wearing thin, and then they put stuff out like this, and then it like wears even thinner, you know, and like we can't do anything about it.
Did they not have that clause in like the original?
They
Switch,
do.
Haley?
They've had that for all time. They have that in the Wii one, I'm fairly certain. Let me just go double check. They can render the software unusable or something like that, because that's most consoles. That's, if not all, right? Like, they've been doing that since they've been able to have control over consoles after you purchase them. Is like, they want to make sure that their intellectual property isn't being used to like pirate things or whatever. And I think you're right, Sarah, that the difference is, while Sony could have this exact same language in its terms, it doesn't exercise those rights as often as Nintendo. So you don't think of them as scary, but Nintendo does. So therefore they're scary. So even though it's the exact same language, when Nintendo says it, it's like, oh, because they actually might do it, I guess, is probably the logic there. But it's just, yeah, they're so aggressive with their IP, and you can tell that that's all they kind of think about is piracy. So of course the language is really vague because they want to catch every single side instance of, you know, one dude somewhere randomly might not be making content that's pornographic or like derogatory or racist or sexist or something, where it's very easy to say it doesn't meet terms of service, get out of here. But they might just like not want him to use their services because one time when he was 16 he bricked another console and they don't trust him anymore. You know, I don't necessarily agree with that line of thought, but that's what they're thinking about, is like, we just want to in general be allowed to brick consoles whenever we want, because ultimately at the end of the day it's our IP. They might be able to refund you. You could maybe argue under the law that you're entitled to a refund then, because it's something you purchased that you're now not able to use.
But then when you have to go to arbitration to argue,
then you'd have to go to arbitration. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of how that would operate.
Yeah, I feel like from an outsider's perspective, it just feels like, because like I think it's not just limited to video games, right? I feel like anything digital, I feel like the legal overreach and the legal protection that is happening, and it's sort of like a weird, I don't know, like, oh, everybody does it. Everybody has this in their legal things, and we're just waiting for someone to abuse it, essentially. Because they're like, oh, but we wouldn't. It's just here just in case. But we wouldn't.
Exactly. No.
It's just here just in case. And it's like, it feels like it's like a slippery slope of like, how long until Nintendo can take my firstborn child? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And look, this is the line. It's in the Wii one. If we detect unauthorized software, services, or devices, your access to the Wii network surface may be disabled, and or the Wii console or games may be unplayable. So they're saying they'll brick your Wii console. So they've been doing this for decades. They're gonna brick your freaking Wii, bro. They're gonna brick it.
Don't break my Wii.
But I wrote a paper on this in law school. Essentially, is that like the Copyright Act is very bad at dealing with IP where it's beneficial to infringe upon the copyright. So for streamers, for YouTube Let's Players, for all these different instances, it's good for Nintendo for people to violate copyright because they're making content that makes people want to buy their games. Whereas for films, TV, board games, any other type of thing, if I pirate a movie, it doesn't give them more money. It takes away money, right? So it's a very unique industry that should probably, I argued in my paper, have a carve out in the Copyright Act where if the copyright owner is essentially permitting this to happen, is create a space where it's permitted, they can't de facto rescind that unless they detail the exact reasons why they're rescinding it, whether it's derogatory, sexist, racist, you know, all those kind of like more legit things, has pornographic content, whatever. They can't just be like, it's Thursday, we're taking away your license because we hate you, you know, like that kind of logic. Like you couldn't be able to lean on that as heavily. But then ultimately, unless we have those better arbitration laws like Switzerland and the EU have or whatever, they would just say, oh, you don't agree with our interpretation of our ability to do that under the Copyright Act, arbitrate us. And then no one has the money to do it. So it'd be kind of a moot point anyways. So it's kind of like late stage capitalism law things, I guess, at the end of the day.
And I feel lucky that like they like, because I think there was that whole thing where, was it like Atlas or PlayStation or Sony that like wouldn't let streamers stream Persona when it came out originally? They were like threatening copyright.
It was so bad, their EULA.
And it is kind of scary to think that like all of the content we make is just because technically they allow us to.
Yeah, 100%. All the risk is
and
on
it's
the
like
content creators.
You're like, oh, okay, so this is just like a, you know, this is just you being nice, and any day now they could be like, you're not allowed to stream our stuff ever.
Or God forbid, weaponize it against like marginalized groups or something. Like what if there's a homophobic game studio who's like, no one gay is allowed to stream our games, and they weaponize the Copyright Act to do that? You could probably get after them for like human rights issues, but not under IP, right? Like that IP doesn't really call out those types of weird niche situations.
But what's weird is with like IP, you're forced to defend it, right? Like you can't allow people to like use your IP. Like you basically have to go to court against people like infringing on your IP, or else it can be argued that that other people can do it because you're allowing them to do it.
Potentially,
but with streaming, you're allowed to stream, right? And it's not like you don't have to defend your IP against streamers.
Well, even every streamer content you make that's based in a video game is created under the presumption that it's going to be permitted and it could be rescinded at any time. Yeah. That's kind of the main issue. It's like
law's crazy, you guys.
so could like the Palworld people be like, well, Nintendo hasn't enforced their copyright on the millions of people who stream their games, so therefore they can't do it against us for making our Pokeballs or whatever?
Not necessarily. It's kind of the that's like a whole test under the law where it's like non-use of IP warrants like infringement elsewhere, where it's a very stringent test that I think wouldn't be applicable in that fact pattern at all, because they do protect Pokemon IP. It's like not just like the individual asset. It's like they could also say, well, they protect their IP in general. It's just there's so much infringement that reasonably it's understandable that they weren't on every single Etsy page canceling Lucario hats or something, because like there's 8 million of them. So it's not fair that they now can't go after Palworld for copying these assets. I think the fact that they went after patent law is crazy. I thought they were going to go after like the 10 PAL things that happen to look like Pokemon. Yeah, the PALs that
look like Pokemon.
And just call it a day. Like the Luxray one, there's another one that kind of look like Eevee or something. Like just get those taken out of the game if you're that pissed about it, and they make new assets and they put it in and everyone moves on with their life. But the patent stuff's a whole other, that's not part of this at all. This is just copyright only, all this stuff. But any questions, class?
Nintendo, don't take my Switch.
They might brick it. You better be really nice to them on your stream, Sarah.
Like, we just totally trashed Welcome Tour.
Oh no!
Oh no, they're gonna. Is that why Ben read his EULA, and that's why he loved Welcome Tour?
He likes Welcome Tour.
They're gonna leave his and brick the rest of ours.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always funny when there's outrage around terms, because it's usually because they didn't read them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like I think there like should be outrage about this like forced arbitration stuff, but the fact of the matter is, it's like I feel like people get upset at like Nintendo specifically, where we need to step back and address it at like the global scale in which it is happening, right? Because it's not just Nintendo; it's literally everything you interact with.
This is boilerplate at this point. This is in pretty much every tech thing you interact with is going to have some kind of arbitration clause, because they don't want to get sued by you, and the law lets them, contract out arbitration. So why wouldn't they?
Haley, could I send Nintendo a contract or something and be like, could I send like amendments and be like, I won't, like, could I send them back and be like, I say no. I say, yeah, but could I?
No,
they wouldn't. They would say no, but could I?
You could try that. They will absolutely not respond to you. But this is how they kind of address that if you don't accept it. Let me find the language here.
Does it just say F off?
Yeah, essentially. So it's not, and also the other thing is you're checking the box isn't the only thing that like denotes acceptance of the service. They also say your use of the service denotes acceptance of the service, but obviously that's way weaker. It's harder to argue that like, there's a lot more case law that says like somebody just could have not seen it and not accepted it or not known it was applicable or whatever. So that's why almost every company has the little checkbox thing now, because case law has said, if you have that, you're probably going to win if someone tries to argue an acceptance thing against you. But now they pretty much just say, like, if you don't accept this, stop using our service. And it's like take it or leave it mentality. And they do one of them had an interesting thing that was like, if you don't accept the service, then you can go and get a refund right away and we'll accept it. But other than that, that's it. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I was going to ask about that too. It seems weird that you can buy something and still not be able to use it if you don't select, like agree to that,
because you won't know the terms until you've opened it up at home and whether you agree or not. Like I think there's a solid argument there that you are legally, not legal advice again. I think you could be legally entitled to a refund because there is no way for you to know the terms of the agreement until you were using the product in your own home after purchase, and you only knew you wouldn't want to accept those terms once you were home at post-purchase. So therefore, they need to give you a refund if you're going to come back to the main point of contact you purchased it from.
Haley, that part up there at the very top about if you're under the age of 18.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask. So like,
if
a
Jeffem
kid
had his
can't
kid
read,
do it, is he technically out of it?
No.
but it looks like it says there that your parent agrees to the user, the EULA, if the kid uses it at all.
Yes. If you are under the age of 18, stop. You must get your parent or legal guardian to read and accept this agreement.
I do not believe that would hold up in court, but because of arbitration, it would never go to court.
That's why the arbitration is
there. That next sentence though of like, by using the console or software, your parent or legal guardian agrees to this.
Yeah.
So why are they telling me that they have to stop and get me to agree to it, but then in the next sentence they're saying, oh, by the way, though, if you're using this, I automatically agree to it?
Yeah, essentially.
Is that what they're saying?
There's potentially wiggle room there to like nothing you're saying is not valid, and like that seems crazy. Yeah. And I think probably there's case law of people pushing back on that. In particular, I think Fortnite's had a bunch of legal battles that get settled. Yeah. Where it's like, well, you accepted the terms and conditions, and the parent's like, I've never looked at this video game in my life. I haven't accepted anything. And then you can try to maybe fight that acceptance is pretty weak there. But usually there's some kind of pseudo reasonableness argument that like a parent should understand that tech being used by its child is subject to EULA and should be the one stepping in to accept things on behalf of their child.
But you can't afford to go to court with a lawyer and argue with Nintendo anyways.
No, you can't.
And I feel like that's where, like, yes, the outrage is misplaced towards Take-Two or whatever, but like the underlying outrage I think people have is that like we're all forced to agree to these things already, and they are already outrageous to begin with, and like and the only recourse to it is have enough money to try and fight it in court, which we all know that nobody does.
Yeah.
So therefore we're just stuck with it, and like
it's take it or leave it,
and
contract drafting. Yeah. It's just if you don't
want
to, yeah.
From that point, it's just like like whether or not you understand that you are agreeing to this all the time, or like this is the first time you figured it out and that's why you're so angry about it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah. I think maybe people are just realizing that these are even a thing. And it just happens to be via a Nintendo console that they're understanding that they exist. Here's that interesting line thing.
Awareness is thing. There it is.
Where it is. Oh, yeah. If you purchase the console or the software from an authorized retailer but do not agree to terms of this agreement, you may be able to return the console or software as applicable for a refund in courts with the applicable return policy. Individuals who do not agree to this agreement, or individuals under the age of 18 who do not have a parent or legal guardian's agreement to this agreement, may not use the console or the software. So I think
that would be such an interesting conversation with your kid. Like, I don't agree to it. You can't use it.
Yeah. I know, right? You'd have to say to your kid, no, you're not allowed
Imagine
to
going back to like,
agree.
You like roll up to Walmart or Target or Best Buy and you're like, I'm returning this because I don't agree with the user license agreement or whatever. And they'd be like, what?
It seems so absurdist, but like that's a valid avenue you could take. Mm-hmm. It's just no one does it.
I mean, it's like the only avenue.
It's the only one besides playing it.
So deeply upset by, like, if it's like a deal breaker, and I feel like they know that it's not, which is why they do it anyways.
Yeah. And the other thing too is sometimes people get confused about privacy policies and what those mean. That's a whole other conversation we don't have to get into, but like the Take-Two thing was funny with everyone worrying about spyware, when privacy policies are, you legally, if you collect personal information of people using your products, which it could be as simple as your name or your username or your password or your email, your like IP address is probably the most egregious one because it has your location and that kind of stuff. You legally have to tell the person what you're doing with their private personal information, how you store it, how you like delete it, how long you hold it for, what you use it for. Like that's like a legal requirement. So the privacy policy is like
in the US too, or is that just because of GDPR?
GDPR is the strongest in the whole world. Okay. Is the high. So like I charge way more to write a privacy policy if they want GDPR compliance because it takes way longer. Whereas US Canada is way less stringent.
I wish I had GDPR.
So GDPR, you have to not only say what you're collecting, but there's only certain.
You have to be able to delete it, right? You have to be able to prove that you can get rid of it.
You can request. You have to detail to them all the rights they have under GDPR, which like right to access, right to deletion, information, all these like additional rights. And then they have only certain reasons you're even allowed to collect information. And you essentially have to detail every single piece of personal information you collect and connect it to why you're allowed to collect it. So you can't just be like, we collect your email because F you. You have to be like, we collect our email because you consent to it when you subscribe to our newsletter. We collect your email when you create an account, and that's valid under blah, blah, blah. Like, and you have to literally, that's why it costs so much more money to draft it, is because I have to be like, literally list every single thing you collect and tell me, and I have to go like this and connect it to every piece of GDPR compliance. Meanwhile, US is like, you got information? Can I have it? Cool.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. That's bad. California's
Chad, I wish I had
good.
human rights.
California's pretty good. Utah's, I think the other one. No, Nevada. Nevada's getting better. But California with Silicon Valley has some of the best privacy laws in the world. So when we do US-Canada privacy policies, we have like a section for, if you're from California, here are your extra rights. And then people in California have like extra rights more than other people.
What? Yeah. Wait a second.
Yeah. It's like, if you're a California resident, you have the right to request deletion of your data. Here's how you can contact us in order to do that. And then like you in Minnesota wouldn't have that.
No.
Yep.
What if I moved to California, but when I started the service, I was in Minnesota? Do I get the rights?
That's a great question. Probably you could argue that now that you're using the services, they might try to argue and limit it to only the services that have the information they've collected from you since you moved. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I think also you have to be a resident of California. It can't just be I'm hanging out in the state. I just happen to be here for the weekend. Delete my data.
And anyways, I would like to sue.
And anyways, I'm suing you now. No arbitration, please. Yeah. But that's EULAs.
This was fun.
That was fun. Hopefully that was fun. I know they're boring to read, but it is an effed up thought that those things just apply to everything we use and we just have to accept them.
This was just a clip from our Patreon exclusive podcast called Bonus Pod. If you support MinnMax on Patreon at the $5 tier, you unlock Bonus Pod each and every week. Haley McLean is joined by cohorts to talk about whatever they want. It's kind of the sister show, the companion show to the MinnMax Show podcast. So there's even more content in here. Also, we take calls from members of the community and we can really dive into the weeds on stuff. So if you want to more than double the amount of podcasts from MinnMax every week, support MinnMax on Patreon at the $5 tier. Thanks so much.